Emotional eating causes. 6 tips to combat stress eating. When you're unhappy or feeling depressed, do you run to the kitchen? Don't worry, you aren't the only one who does that. Frequently, people use food as solace when they are experiencing strong, challenging emotions. In this video, we'll cover the following: what emotional eating is and how to spot it, how to determine if you are an emotional eater, what are some of the causes that result in emotional eating, 6 techniques to apply to help you cope with emotional eating. Emotional eating is when you eat as a result of your feelings. Everybody errs occasionally. For survival, our bodies need nourishment. It seems logical that eating activates the brain's reward system and improves mood. It can be an issue if emotional eating occurs frequently and you don't have other coping mechanisms. Eating doesn't deal with the real problem. Even though it could seem like it means to cope in those situations, food won't make you feel better if you're stressed, anxious, bored, lonely, depressed, or even weary. For some people, this pattern of using food as a coping mechanism leads to guilt and shame, which are harder emotions to deal with. It might be challenging to control emotional eating. So many of our activities that we partake in revolve around food. We eat food during and throughout celebrations. Making meals for someone who is struggling is a gesture of concern. Connecting with others through shared meals seems to be also common. Having an emotional bond with food is normal. Your ability to choose when, what, and how you eat is the main objective. There will be instances where using food as a coping mechanism for strong emotions makes sense. There are also superior coping mechanisms for different situations. What triggers someone to eat due to their emotions? Almost everything can trigger someone to want to eat. Included in the list of common external factors for emotional eating are work stress, money concerns, health challenges, and in some cases, relationship difficulties. People who emotionally eat more frequently are those who adhere to rigid diets or who have a history of dieting. Other causes of emotional eating can include the lack of introspective awareness, or in other words, not knowing how you feel, the lack of ability to describe what you feel, the inability to manage what you are feeling and not being able to manage your emotions, the existence of a condition that involves an issue with respect to your lowered cortisol response to stress that you may experience. Emotional eating frequently happens on autopilot. Food is increasingly used as a coping mechanism, which strengthens the habit. Can emotional eating be considered an eating disorder? An eating disorder is not considered as just emotional eating on its own. Emotional eating may be considered a sign of disordered eating, which could eventually result in the emergence of an eating disorder. Among the symptoms of disordered eating are extreme rigidity to food selection, categorizing foods as good or bad, frequent dieting or food restriction, frequently eating in response to emotions rather than physical hunger, irregular meal timing, obsessively thinking about food to the extent it starts to interfere with other aspects of your life, consistent feelings of guilt or shame after consuming foods you perceive as unhealthy. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics indicates that eating disorders are recognized when a person's eating habits match specific requirements. Despite having problematic eating habits, many people do not have eating disorders. To get help for your concerns with emotional eating, you don't need to have an eating disorder diagnosis. You should enjoy a healthy relationship with food, and reaching out for help in determining your needs should be of importance. Do consult a trained dietitian or mental health professional if you believe you have disordered eating habits. So why food? There are several causes why eating becomes a coping mechanism. When we experience troubling emotions, there may be a sense of void or emptiness. Dopamine is released when we eat. This is a brain chemical that makes us feel good. With regards to food, we also form routines and habits. If you always eat when you're anxious, you can unknowingly go for food at the first hint of stress. Additionally, food is available everywhere and is legal to consume. Food-related messages and commercials can make you feel hungry as well. In summary, anyone can be impacted by emotional eating. Emotional eating may happen to everyone, regardless of their gender, age, or stage of life. If a person is unable to find other coping mechanisms, it may become a problem. Emotional hunger versus physical hunger. To survive, humans must eat. The need for food and preferences for particular flavors or textures are normal. You might be unsure of how to distinguish between emotional and physical hunger signs. It may be difficult as it could be a combination of the two. You are more prone to suffer emotional eating if you haven't eaten in several hours or normally don't eat enough during the day. Here are some hints to help you distinguish between the two. Physical hunger. This sort of hunger develops over time. One will feel the sensation of fullness after eating and as a sign to stop eating. This form of eating is linked to the last time you had something to eat. Emotional hunger. The urge to eat can come on suddenly. One does not notice the feeling of being full, or despite feeling full, you continue to eat. This form of eating is triggered by the need for comfort or being soothed. Are you an emotional eater? If you experience emotional eating, you may feel you are unable to control your cravings around certain foods, an urge to eat when overwhelmed by strong emotions, a desire to eat despite not being physically hungry. In summary, although there are important distinctions between physical and emotional hunger, they can be readily mistaken for another cause. Oftentimes, emotional hunger is acute and connected to your emotions. Physical hunger can develop more gradually and is connected to your most recent meal. Tips to stop emotional eating. It can be challenging to change a habit of emotional eating, but it is possible. Here are some coping mechanisms to make use of. Create an emotional journal. Being aware and understanding your habits will go a long way. Emotional eating can be a reflexive behavior. Your chances of making changes are better the more you stay aware of how you feel when you do particular activities and decide to eat in response. Try keeping track of the instances when you eat while not feeling very hungry. Physically, record the following. What was occurring at this time? What were you feeling? What emotions did you experience when you felt the need to eat? You might also want to include a note as to what action you took. Did you immediately eat? Did you try to wait it out for a few minutes? Did you engage in self-distraction activity? Don't judge yourself based on what you discovered. When you eat in response to emotions, make an effort to determine what the trigger feelings and underlying emotions are. It takes a lot of practice to recognize your trigger points. As you begin your exploration of the root causes of emotional eating, be kind to yourself. It doesn't need to be a flawless exercise. Find different coping mechanisms. You can begin to make changes once you are more aware of the feelings, circumstances, or thoughts that can cause emotional eating. If you realize that you always eat when you're feeling anxious, you should pay attention to the causes of your anxiety and consider actions you can take to reduce your anxiety for the long term. If you realize that you eat when you're bored, think about strategies to deal with it by managing your time, by keeping occupied in a worthwhile cause. Think of activities that you can engage in that will not result in boredom. It will take time and repetition of identifying what your triggers are where emotional eating is concerned. Try out a few different things to see what works the best for you. Become physically active. Stress and anxiety can be effectively managed by moving your body. Your body's levels of stress hormones can be lowered by exercise. Endorphins are also released, which improves your mood. A regular exercise schedule can assist in controlling underlying emotional eating triggers. Your exercise routine does not have to be intense. Consider going for a 5-minute stroll or doing some light stretching if you aren't already moving. Yoga and other mindful practices appear to provide additional advantages. Yoga practitioners report generally having lower levels of stress and anxiety. The art of mindfulness. The benefits of mindfulness for mental health are numerous. Its effectiveness in treating depression and anxiety has been demonstrated to reduce stress eating. Being mindful means paying attention to the present moment. Mindfulness techniques may be beneficial if you discover that stress, depression, or anxiety lead to emotional eating. Here are a few examples of mindfulness exercises. Taking a moment to sit quietly and concentrate on your breathing. Scanning your body for any areas of tension and consciously releasing them. Listening to guided meditation. Focusing on the environment by naming a few things you can taste, smell, see, touch, and hear. The practice of mindful eating involves using internal cues to guide your meal choices. Eating with awareness can help you have a better relationship with food and is linked to psychological good health. It allows you to truly enjoy the act of eating. It incites you to take your time and pay closer attention to the way the meal looks, tastes, feels, and sounds. In order to eat mindfully, one must take their time and truly consider what they are craving at that very moment. Is it a meal? What kind of food, if any? What else will satiate this urge if not food? Learning to eat mindfully takes practice and time. If you're interested in learning more, think about working with a nutritionist who has knowledge of mindful or intuitive eating. Eat enough food. We are aware that physical and emotional hunger can be very different, but it's a crucial background habit to make sure you're eating enough as well. Our brains are programmed to ensure that we consume enough food to survive. If you don't eat enough on a particular day, you might notice that your cravings for food increase later in the day. Eating a variety of foods with meals is frequently found to be the most gratifying. You can experiment to see which meals will fill you up the most. Increasing your protein intake may be beneficial if you discover that you are physically hungry a lot during the day. Sources of protein could help you feel satisfied for longer. Try to get 30% of your daily calories from protein. Among the foods that include protein are meat, chicken, fish, and seafood, eggs, dairy products, soy beverages, tofu and tempeh, beans and lentils, nuts and seeds. Notice how hungry you feel. It can be challenging to recognize your hunger and fullness cues, especially if you've been on and off diets for a significant portion of your life. Learning to recognize how bodily hunger and fullness generally feels can take some practice. Knowing your physical hunger signals might help you recognize when you're actually eating due to emotional reasons. Physical indicators of hunger include stomach grumbling, feeling dizzy or lightheaded, a feeling of loss in energy, having trouble concentrating, becoming moody, having more food-related thoughts. Imagine your hunger as being on a scale between 1 and 10. This will help you reconnect with your hunger and fullness. Extreme hunger is level 1. You might feel weak and ill physically, and you might be tempted to eat everything that seems edible. In contrast, after a substantial holiday feast, 10 is an excessive state of fullness. Every few hours, make it a point to check in with yourself and gauge how hungry you feel. This can aid in bringing your innate patterns of hunger and fullness to light. Through practice, you might become aware of some early indicators of hunger. You can use it to determine when you're not actually physically hungry, but still feel like eating. This could be a sign of an emotional eating trigger that you now have the knowledge to address. Liked our video? Do share your comments below. Like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.